know I was already set up to go live. No, no, I didn't realize I already had this set up. Hi, Kevin. Kevin, I didn't even know I went live already for real. I saw you here chatting.
Got a new doll.
I think you're like trying to, there you go.
Got a bunch of other stuff too.
She's excited to show you guys. She's going to do a little live on it later. What she bought today at the mall. Hi, Christy Love.
Hello.
Dandy Blooms. It's delayed some on your end. Hi, Larky.
Thanks, Lark.
Let me see this.
This is actually the newer version.
Yeah, he looks different.
Yeah.
He's got that updated face.
Yeah.
Oh, his hair is like my style, which is scary. Oh.
It would be pretty cool if I did start a channel, Kevin. Hey, Burn Hot Dog.
She's going to do her own little live later. But I was excited to read some of these stories that I got today. Hey, the Bryan clan. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, long time no see.
Hi, Sandra. I let Carolyn know. I sent her a text. That's okay. Are you Little Miss? Hi, LMNW50. And I'm excited to read some of these, so I couldn't wait. So I started even reading some at the mall, and I thought, I got to do this. Oh, Kokomo? I know where that is. Oh, yeah. That's far away from me, but I know where it is. We've been there. Yeah, the Bryan clan comes out of the bushes for the scary stories.
Oh, you're making some homemade pizza, Lisa H?
Where's Lisa H? Oh, there she is. Hi, Lisa H. Yum, yum. Right? You won't be scared.
Hi, Mitten.
Hi, Carol Clark.
Oh, boy.
Garnet just jumped on the mittens. Crazy time. I want to get right into this. I don't want to waste any time. Just wanted to say hi real quick. What an ugly doll, Chucky. F you, lady.
That was a funny scene.
You're going to be listening? Okay. With the horses. Hi, Jenny Anderson. Yeah, we just went to the mall with Burnt Hot Dog.
Yeah, not the hospital.
Oh, okay, Kevin, that'd be good. I can't wait to see what you're going to be selling. Okay, I'm going to get right into this.
Kevin.
Kevin.
Sandy, that wasn't there.
That's okay. That's all right. Hi, Shay. Hi. Oh, let's see. Just got my mail, brother. Oh.
Oh.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to start reading. Haunted Gary. Just down the highway from me. For all of the Gary faithful who bring ideas in and entertain them royally, for one of them may be the king, from Mark Van Doren. This was from 2015. I walked down towards the end of the road, and in the fog, a woman appeared. She said, "Don't you worry, my friend. I'll take care. Take my hand. I'll take you there. Oh, take me to a place without no name." Michael Jackson, A Place with No Name.
Hi, Brian.
Brian Clan.
Brian Clan. Same thing.
Okay. People often say, "I couldn't have done it without you," with flippancy, meaning that someone was helpful in some small or big way. But when I say that there are two people I could not have done this without, I mean it absolutely, literally. For those who don't live or work there, going into Gary, Indiana, for any reason is not something that is generally done. That's so true. It has such a bad reputation. It's so sad. As a researcher, I have spent much time researching, lecturing, and hosting tours in the very worst neighborhoods of Chicago, some of the deadliest in the world, including Inglewood, an enclave that was once home to serial killer H.H. Holmes, and today has one of the highest murder rates of any area on earth. But Gary is a different story. Gary is Gary, Indiana, and even Chicagoans, with very rare exception, simply do not go there. As soon as I announced this project, however, two people who have been my dear colleagues for years sent me instant messages saying, "We will help you with whatever you need." Len Miller and J.C. Rosaritas are both lifelong residents of Northwest Indiana, and Miller is a Gary cop. To say that I felt angels had been dispatched to help me tell Gary's ghost stories would not be exaggerating. And so they so generously, escorted me to some of the most harrowing places in the city, from the frigid ruins of St. Mary's Mercy Hospital to the lawn of the House of 200 Demons, the story of which rocked even the mainstream media in 2014. They are so smart, so sweet, and so kind. And I was thrilled that they were always accompanied by Len's delightful and equally smart daughter, Tori, a dyed-in-the-wool historian and investigator like her dad. I cannot thank the three of them enough, not only for being my guides, but also for being truly wonderful and loyal friends. In the city of Gary, too, I must wholeheartedly thank former Gary Chief of Police, Wade Ingram, for allowing us to investigate St. Mary's Mercy Hospital, and Brandon Crofton, another wonderful officer who helped so much by looking for us and sharing his own experiences during our investigation of the small farms area. I am deeply thankful to Stephen McShane of the Calumet Regional Archives for helping me find the photos I needed and for being so accommodating to my schedule. Many thanks to John B. Stevens for the beautiful contemporary photos he captured for this book. John has one of the most appreciative eyes for things many don't find beautiful, and I think you will agree that his photographs capture the true magic that still lives, even in the rubble of the Magic City. He and his partner in paranormal investigation, David Scott, have been great supporters of my work, and I am grateful to be their associates and friends. My good friend, Bill Swinford, is someone I met delving into the history of Chicago ghost stories and he turned out to have a deep love for the region as well. His frequent messages to me, full of fascinating facts and tales of Gary, steered me towards stories I may have missed if not for his help, and I continue to be so grateful for the friendship of this tremendous local historian. I was thrilled with my closest friend, Clarence Goodman, offered to read this book as I wrote it, and I cannot thank him enough for his very helpful criticism and ridiculously kind accolades. I'm grateful for the support of another superb historian, Chicago file and writer Laura Mazuka Toops, who was to be a partner on this project before our busy schedules sabotaged the plan. Of course, I must thank my wonderful daughters, as always, for being so patient with me as I wrote this book and for being a big part of my own personal connection to the Indiana Dunes. I cherish the hours we spend traveling through the dunes together, and I hope you will always remember them and discover the equal but different beauty of Gary with me someday. To my friends Wanda and Michael Spuddick, Marcia Soyster, and Barb Spittler, who made a home for me in Northwest Indiana and introduced me to so many people and places I love so much. You are my lifelong pals, even though the stretches between our times together have grown too long. I hope that in this book you see reflected the love for the region's history and ghost lore that all of you ignited in me. Finally and overwhelmingly, I thank God for letting me help people tell their stories and believe in ghosts. Okay. Hi, Nicole Griffith.
Just in case you guys wanted to know, I got Chucky today at Spencer's. He was $90. Then I got Glenn last month. He was $500. I got him at on Trick or Treat Studios website. Just in case you guys have been wondering.
Hi, Linda Fisher.
Hello.
See if I missed anybody. Felicia Lewis.
And yeah, Kevin, that Tiffany doll you saw that was $500. That one's also from Trick or Treat Studios. You're welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Davita.
Oh, hi,
How
Davita.
exciting. We've been missing you. Carolyn's going to be so happy. She's been missing you. Everybody's been missing you. We all love you so much. Hi, Cat Scott Mai. Hi, Casey Rex. Yes, we have, Casey.
Yeah. We've only seen Alex Vincent, Brad Dourif, and two others. Brad Dourif's daughter, and I think the girl who plays Kyle.
We are keeping you in our prayers, Davita. We know it's a hard time right now.
Yeah.
I just didn't know they had so much. It's like almost that whole store is like that now. And it's changed a lot.
Thank you, Davita.
Yeah, when next time we go, you'll have to take these.
Yeah.
And maybe,
Garner, what are you doing?
They can sign them.
Hopefully Billy Boyd will be at one of the conventions one of these years so I can get him to sign Glenn.
Let's see if Carolyn saw my message. Nope, not yet.
Yeah, I'll definitely get them both a stroller, Casey.
Okay. Oh, would you mind turning that light on? Because it's starting to get kind of dim.
You know who would be really cool to meet? Don Mancini, the creator of Chucky.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Wow.
I wanted the light on.
Okay. Introduction. Ghost hunting in the former murder capital of America.
Kevin liked your shirt.
Oh, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hi, Mimi.
Yeah, I'll get a double stroller. Or some of those baby carrier backpacks. Walk around the convention with both of those on.
Bonnie. Really? They're getting too carried away with that stuff in there now. They used to have a lot better things than all that stuff.
Yeah, now it's all pretty much that.
Yeah. Okay. Now we'll begin. So excited about this book.
Both of those books are pretty cool.
Yeah, I have another one too. Spooky Indiana. Okay. It's the crumbling capital of what they call the region, the northwest part of the state of Indiana that skirts Lake Michigan to the north.
Burn hot dog. Really?
Hi, Peridot.
Hi, Peridot.
Would you pick up that can?
Because somebody keeps knocking it over.
Okay, let's see. Where was I here? That skirts Lake Michigan to the north and borders Chicago to the west. They say that if you're from Indiana and want to know whether you're from the region, ask yourself if there is corn around and whether you are within 1 mile of a person of African American or Mexican descent. If the answers are no and yes, in that order, then you are. But today, not even those dyed-in-the-wool residents of the region quite know what to make of Gary, the name of which, for years, made most people think of the Music Man and smooth-talking salesman Professor Harold Hill. Hill claimed to be from Gary at the time of its glorious inception. Gary was a model city by all accounts. So when he declared trouble in River City, Iowa, with a capital T no less, folks felt he knew what he was talking about. Ironically, it was Gary on which the trouble actually fell, and with a gusto reserved for only a particular brand of American city, the industrial instant city that grew dangerously fast and whose people could not possibly foresee that the progression that had built it would eventually kill it. To say that Gary, Indiana is haunted by the kinds of ghosts in this book seems not quite right. Gary is haunted, all right, and it's certainly been called both a ghost town and a ghost town. But the city is haunted first and foremost by the living. A worldwide symbol of the triumph of industry for more than half a century, the so-called Magic City was, in its glory days, a model of the marriage of industry and community, a towering presence overlooking the waters of Lake Michigan along the stunning Indiana Duneland, a perfect place to work and live and raise a family. Today, Gary has become the poster child for what happens when technological advancement kills the need for human labor. Even today, with the shards of Albert Gary's dream scattered across the dunes, it is impossible to talk about Gary without talking about the steel mills. Gary was the steel mills, but it also is the steel mills. There's a misconception that the steel mills in Gary are gone. They are very much still here, though U.S. Steel has been largely usurped by ArcelorMittal, which today claims output levels unheard of even in the glory days of U.S. Steel, before the technological revolution rendered the majority of its workers obsolete. Incidentally, that's where my dad retired from, U.S. Steel, and Dave retired from ArcelorMittal. Let's see. Still, the condition of Gary then and the condition of it now are absolutely and totally reflective of the number of people who were and are employed by the mills. Here's a couple of pictures. Here's Broadway, downtown Gary, 1937, and then the funeral procession of Albert Gary, 1927. Oh my gosh, Bonnie, burnt hot dog. Oh wait, no, never mind. I thought that was the streetcar in Gary, but it looks like it might be the South Shore. But no, the South Shore doesn't go through downtown Gary. Bonnie, the reason I'm saying that is I believe this is a streetcar that used to run in Gary. And you know who used to drive that? Well, I'm sure there was more than one. Granny's dad. My great grandpa Buck, they called him. So that'd be weird if somehow that's him, you know. I'm sure there's other people though that worked there too. So. Oh, and then here's the funeral procession. The city was founded in 1906 to produce steel, period. Everyone who worked here or came to work here made steel, and every school, church, and community organization founded here was founded around, by, and for the community of steel workers. Over the past 40 years, just a minute. Sorry, I have a voice message I have to listen to. Okay. All right. Over the past 40 years, the steel mills of Northwest Indiana, including today's ArcelorMittal giant, the largest steel producer on earth, have maintained the enormous output levels of the past. But the mill now uses state-of-the-art production technology, meaning that about 1/5 of the previous employees are producing the same amount of steel as before. The city, too, is half the size it was in 1970. Its population reduced from 170,000 then to 80,000 today. Neighboring Hammond, formerly a sleepy hamlet to the west, actually has a larger population today than the blown out shell of the once matchless city of Gary. The administration of the city is constantly on the defense against attackers who ask from all corners of the earth, why don't they do something? Why don't they clean it up? Why don't they tear it down? The city has one blunt answer to all the accusations. Taxes pay for a city to operate. If people don't work, they don't pay taxes. And without taxes, a city shuts down. Though the unemployment rate stands at about 9%, this number reflects only those actively looking for jobs. In Gary, there is a shocking percentage of people who have never even had a job. People who, because of the absolute lack of opportunity here, have been raised to not even try to find one. That is the level of economic reality that the outsider has to come into Gary being aware of. What does it come to? In 1994, Gary gained a new title, eclipsing Steel City and Magic City, when it was declared the murder capital of America, with 91 murders per capita, three times the number in neighboring Chicago that year. Those numbers are down now because the people have all but disappeared. But murder still takes most of the headlines in Gary, and sometimes around the world, like in 2014, when Darren Dion Van was taken into custody for the serial killers of at least 7 women over as long as 2 decades. There is even a New Hampshire-born writer who calls himself Gary, Indiana, and who specializes in creative fiction about, no surprise, serial killers. About a quarter of the city's buildings are abandoned and shuttered at best, in ruins at worst. City Methodist Church, the Palace Theater, St. Mary's Mercy Hospital, and even a Sheraton hotel loom over the ruins of the Magic City due to lack of funds to tear them down. Citizens are asked to clean the parks, as the city has only enough money to pay to keep up 6 of more than 50 parks in the city. 50 parks. There you are, Kevin. Mommy Ramblings, Carolyn. Uh-oh, what's happening? Carolyn, stop. Hi, Angie Brooks. Oh my gosh, Carolyn. Sassy Darcy's here. QB. Carolyn, I sent you 2 messages letting you know. I know, Carolyn. Can you believe the Bryan clan? We haven't seen her in forever. Look who else is here, Carolyn. Miss Davida. Jenny Anderson. Love you, Carolyn. No, I do. And I love you, share your ramblers and let them be scooters for a little while. And let's see. "50 parks. That's crazy. I'm not surprised, I guess. The mayor has apparently thought of asking citizens to sweep the streets themselves, as the city has no working street sweeper. Shelters and food banks are the busiest places in town. About a quarter of the city's teachers have been laid off. The library has been closed for a year. There are few restaurants or stores, and not one movie theater. In Gary, which still has a population of almost 80,000 people, there is no Starbucks. This is the setting for Haunted Gary, the book you are about to read. There is no shortage of housing for ghosts here, and no shortage of reasons for them to gather. Besides the true haunting of the city by its long-gone pioneers of industry, Gary continues to be what it has always been, even before the decline and fall of the dream. A place that, like Chicago, inextricably joined to it, has forever drawn those searching to do great things and awful things, to find both incredible beauty and endless vice. Since ghosts are nothing if not the residue of the passions of both good and terrible persuasions, Gary is, of course, one enormous, sprawling, haunted house. But the ghosts of Gary do not come out of the shadows easily. And here's two pictures. One is Mayor Richard Hatcher with Muhammad Ali, circa 1977, and below, the ruins of City Methodist Church in 2015. Carolyn, stop. There was such a huge divide when the citizens of Gary were voting in 67, Richard Hatcher. I can still remember that because I had relatives living there in Gary. Ooh, here we go. The stories in this book are the few that have managed to survive in a place with little community to keep them alive. There are stories of abandoned hospitals and homes, treacherous highways, brothels and bank robbers, the violence of race and labor riots, drownings and shootings, deadly rail mishaps, the residue of gangland, both past and present, and always, always accidents in the mills. They are also stories of Duneland, the hermits who left Gary and other civilizations for a life of solitude and beauty in the windswept heaven of one of the most beautiful places on earth. Strange creatures sighted or imagined in the dense local forest and wide waters. Ghost ships of this great lake, silent film stars, and even the pioneers of flight. For all its ghosts, those who see beauty, including some passionate residents who refuse to abandon it, see it still in Gary, looking past the rubble, or perhaps into its very heart, living with its ghost, and in some ways as them. Here's a picture of number 413, East 43rd Street, where one of accused serial killer Darren Dion Van's victims was found in 2014. Carol. Chapter 1, Nerves of Steel, Ghosts of the Gary Mills. It's not true crime, it's ghost stories. Calm down, girls and boys. Carolyn. No, I gotta get my, I don't want to show myself. I'm gonna go like this. I don't know, because I don't know how to turn the camera off. Gotta get my straw. I saw myself on here the other day when I did this, and it was horrible. Oops, I lost my place. How the city of the century grew up where it did. How the city of the century grew up where it did is its own particular story, a story quite similar to and intertwined with. Hi, Cat's My. Oh, thank you. Scooter Sad Fishy. Designer soft sock fun. How cute. Thank you. I'm not sad fishing. Darren Dion Van was the sub really of an ID show? Oh, I think I've heard of him actually. Thank you, Felicia. Lisa H. Thank you, Mimi. I'm not sand fishing. Hi, sorry, Shares. That's funny. Right, Carolyn. Well, I just mentioned him. It was right here in this. It was in this book. I'm so excited. I always want to buy local regional books, and I never do. But I did today. There's a bunch more I want to buy too. So, Carolyn, stop. Okay. And intertwined with the development of neighboring Chicago, which also grew from swamps and sand dunes, long deemed hostile to permanent human settlement. By the 1800s, not even Native Americans had their homes here on the southernmost Indiana shore. In the earliest days of the area's recorded history, migrant tribes of Miami, Ottawa, and Potawatomi made use of native plants and fauna during their transient periods in the area, but none thought of staying a while. Farming was difficult, and no permanent villages were settled until the 17th century. Father James Marquette, remember I took you guys to Marquette Park, where we saw the little baby deer and stuff? That was that park named after this guy. Father James Marquette, too, led a posse of traders and missionaries through the region along the Calumet River and reportedly camped at present-day Miller Beach near the Gary Park that bears his name. That's where I took you, remember? Miller Beach. Oh, Kevin, thank you. You're spoiling me. Thank you, Kevin. You didn't have to do that. But I appreciate it. Hi, Delta Dawn. I'm from Chicago, but adopted and raised in St. Louis. A lot of family in Chicago. This chat is thick with Chicagoans. Okay. Let's see. Miller Beach, near the Gary Park that bears his name. It wasn't until 1822 that the first white settler, Joseph Bailey, made a home in the dunes and even had little company until the century turned and brought settlers with big plans, but not for farming. Sometime I'll take you guys out to Bailey Homestead. That is so beautiful out there. We love going out there. And it's safe out there. It's safe out there. It's to the east. It's over by my parents and by where I went to school and all that. It's so nice. We go on haunted walks there. We used to around Halloween. Spook walks, we called them, in the woods. Carolyn, stop. You know I love you so much. This just gives me something to do. I get to share my reading with you guys. Let's see. Beginning in the late 1880s, countless tons of sand were removed from the dunes and shipped to Chicago for building, I didn't know that, and industrial use as the post-fire city built with a fervor, never before seen in human history. Forests, marshes, and sand dunes were leveled to support the burgeoning city of big shoulders, leading many other seers to imagine similar cityscapes in many other parts of the world, including the adjacent terrain. See, they're giving us a history, so we'll maybe understand some of the ghosts, around this area, I guess. So they're giving a history. Albert H. Gary was a judge in these bustling days of development, and when he became chairman of U.S. Steel, he was determined to secure for his corporation a piece of the industrializing American world. Having watched the center of national industry moving from the East Coast to the Midwest, Gary chose what he saw as a prime location for his company to put down roots, a site close to the business hub of Chicago, the rail center of the country, and set on the shore of Lake Michigan, perhaps the most important port along the Gulf Atlantic trade route. Albert Gary's plans spawned the creation of the Gary Land Company and the Indiana Steel Company to build housing and the mill itself, respectively. The resulting complex held 12 blast furnaces, 47 steel furnaces, and a reimagined harbor to hold the largest steam vessels of the day. Would-be workers from every corner of Europe poured in, along with migrant workers from all around the United States, creating an instant city that grew to 16,000 inhabitants in scarcely 3 years' time. In 1909, when Gary was officially incorporated, it was one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, but still an infant. In the next 10 years, the city would more than triple in population, claiming 55,000 residents by 1920. It was also something of a black sheep amid the great labor upheavals of the time. From the beginning, Albert Gary attempted to avoid labor uprisings and strikes by fostering close employee relations with the extremely varied ethnic population that manned his empire. The Great Depression changed the good times in Gary, as elsewhere. However, in U.S. Steel laid off workers in unprecedented numbers. The future brought unionization with U.S. Steel, recognizing the Steelworkers Organizing Committee as its workers' representative. World War II was a financial godsend when steel production skyrocketed, and Gary workers and bosses mourned the dead but counted their currency. Until the strikes came, the nationwide strike of 1919 was hardly the last. After the war, the first two of three strikes from 1946 to 1959 slowly wore away at the foundations of the men's steel. I barely remember. Brian Clan, thank you. Thank you so much. Aw, thank you. It's so sweet. You guys know you don't have to do this. This is embarrassing. I just want to read. Kevin, where are you going? But thank you anyway. Thank you so much. Hi, sweet pea. That's so sweet. But I was just going to say, I do remember the strike of 1959, barely. I would have been 4 that year, 4 years old. And I remember, maybe I just remember it more from hearing my parents talk about it. But my dad went with my uncle and I think their dad, a couple other guys, and they all went out to California looking for jobs. Okay, Brian Clan. But yeah, they all went out there for jobs, looking for jobs. And if they, we would all have moved out there, I guess. But they didn't stay very long. I remember my mom said my dad was so homesick. All he wanted to do was get back home, which I always thought was so cute. She's like, your father was so homesick. It was just so terrible. Sending all the love. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you, Nicole Griffith. That is so sweet. Thank you. No. But thank you very much. You guys don't have to do this. Please, okay? I'm going to have to start shutting it off, I guess. But thank you so much. And no, I don't know who got the lunchbox. Still trying to figure out. Hi, Lori Colley. Mike, I don't want to, no offense, Mike, but she didn't do that. I don't know where you heard that. Must have been a different Mike. I mean, you must have, I don't know, Mike, but she wasn't, I know Carolyn really likes you a lot. We all do. We would never talk about you, Mike. QB, did you send this? QB? Or it's Muppets, maybe. You did, QB? Thank you. It is so adorable. It's absolutely beautiful. And Lexi and I are getting your stuff together, and we will be sending it. We were going to send it yesterday, I think, but it was that blizzard that we were having. And then today we went with Bonnie out to the mall. Thank you, QB. I absolutely love it. That's why I had it sitting right here so I could remember to find out again. He worked in the mill too many years ago. Okay, let's see. The final strike, lasting more than 100 days, allowed foreign steel companies to get a foothold in Gary and elsewhere in the States. Later, as technology gained ground and made inroads in the industry, human labor began to measure as obsolete. From the 1980s onward, the human workforce in Northwest Indiana had shrunk to about 25% of its most flourishing state, though the same amount of steel continues to be produced. The massive presence of the steel industry, with most of U.S. Steel's operations now overshadowed by ArcelorMittal, continues to reign over the city of Gary and the southernmost point of Lake Michigan. Oh, here we go. A couple of pictures. Blast furnace from 1930s and mill workers during the steel strike of 1919. Just one of the blast furnaces. Okay, continues to reign over the city of Gary and the southernmost point of Lake Michigan, despite the shrinking and saddening of the once mighty settlement below. The folklore of the mill, including its ghost stories, has also declined with the population of workers. Still, some of the old stories are told of the days when the steel mills formed the entire structure of life in Gary, and when death by the mills was still a very real occurrence, typically sudden and horrifying. Loss of digits and limbs, men crushed by railroad cars, decapitations. More than 500 steel workers have perished at the Gary plant since 1906. Rumor has it that tragic accidents and deaths are still extremely common, but unpublicized by these highly secured, locked-down corporations. Nonetheless, when someone dies, supernatural stories often follow, the dead perhaps making the cause of their fates known, despite exceptionally secretive conditions. One of the most feared fates in the mills is of falling into the heat, the vats, or ladles of molten metal. That's what Dave did out there. He was a ladle liner. He would get down in those big ladles and a liner. He would line them with bricks. And before that, he was a crane operator. And it is a very dangerous place. And yes, people do get killed there still. The steel can reach a temperature of almost 3,000 degrees, and a human body will apparently disintegrate in the substance in a matter of seconds. The question of what to do with the ladle after such a mishap is one that allegedly continues to be a problem. Should the mill use it anyway, since there's no trace of the unfortunate vaporized body? Should it be disposed of respectfully, despite the tremendous loss in product, about 150 tons of steel? One worker talks of a woman who lost her husband in a ladle accident and demanded a body from the mill, wanting to give him a proper burial. Being unable to provide one, the company reportedly cut out a man-sized chunk of the ladle and sent it to the funeral home. The mortician sealed it in the chosen casket and convinced the widow to have a closed casket funeral. Wow. I am too, QB. So sweet. I got another. Oh, thank you, Jenny D. Thank you. You guys are so sweet. Thank you so much. All I'm doing is reading, guys. I'm not doing anything major, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. Carolyn, are you still here? Carolyn, Mommy Ramblings. Hi, Crime Scene. Carolyn. Yeah, I've never heard of that. Cut out a man-sized chunk of the ladle, sent it to the funeral home. Ah, QB. Right, QB. Now let's see. Stories have circulated for years that ladles containing human remains are sometimes buried in Lake Michigan, leading to stories of fishermen off the Gary coast picking up men in the water who regale with their rescuers with chilling stories of being burned alive before disappearing before the fishermen's eyes. According to one such witness, it was in the early, that's giving me chills right now. It was in the early 1970s that he was fishing offshore of U.S. Steel in the early spring and saw a figure in the water about 100 yards away. Powering up his motor, he headed toward the figure and wondered if it possibly was a man he'd heard about on the radio who had gone missing while swimming at Miller Beach 2 days earlier. The riptides in the dunes are notorious, leading to several deaths in any given year, as are cases of those who attempt suicide in the lake by various means and either fail to drown or change their minds. As he neared the figure, he saw that it was, in fact, a man not at all struggling or looking at all frightened, pained, or fatigued. The fisherman stopped the boat and dropped anchor. Throwing a rope to the man in the water, he pulled him into the ladder and helped him on board. As he heaved him onto the deck, the rescuer noticed that the figure's clothes were work clothes, long pants, long sleeve shirt, and even work boots all sopping wet. Oh my gosh, I've got chills right now for real. And this fisherman, they quote him as saying, "It was odd. I almost laughed because the clothes," okay, Carolyn, good. I'm glad you're listening. "Because the clothes were so weird for this guy being in the water off a beach area. I was used to seeing swimmers swimming off their boats and stuff like that, beach clothes. Of course, things just flashed through your mind, and all I could think was that he was a worker on a barge or a ship of some kind and fell overboard. But there was not a boat in sight of any kind, not even recreation boats or other fishing boats, as it was still really cold for the year. This guy had to have been there for a long time, but he seemed completely fine, wasn't even shivering. He had close cut hair, but he dried his face with the towel I handed him and then smiled this big smile and looked right at me and he said, "No more work for me." I asked him what happened to him, and he didn't say anything, just shook his head, except that he was tired. I took him down to the bunk below and asked if he wanted food, and he said no and wouldn't drink water. So I told him to just lay down and I'd radio for a police car to meet us on shore. And I went up and called and told them what happened and powered up the motor to go in. And when we got there, I talked to the cops for a few minutes. And one of them went down to talk to the guy and he was gone. So we thought he came up and wandered off, but there was no one around at all. They even drove around the area while I waited there, but we never found him. A few years later, I heard the stories about people picking up people off the shore at the mill, and I will tell you, it gave me the heebie-jeebies. Oh, that's given. Oh, sometimes deaths in the mill leave behind evidence of the event in the form of disembodied voices or smells. One worker said that after his co-worker was crushed by a rail accident, he'd frequently heard a male voice say, "Hey." Oh, and let me tell you guys, my Uncle Randall's friend, he was a friend of all of ours. He was killed out at one of the mills. And he was only, Glenn was early 20s, and some steel from a crane, I guess, fell on him and smashed him. That was the first funeral I think I ever went to. I was like 15, but couldn't have smashed him. Well, I mean, it killed him. Something happened at the mill, and I always heard he was hit by something with the crane, but there was an open casket and he looked normal. I do remember that. Ugh. He'd frequently hear a male voice say, "Hey," in his ear as he was working near the death site. Another worker told of working with a buddy who had had his skull pierced while working in a continuous rod mill and died instantly. Oh my God. For months afterward, workers would smell a strong smell of cigars at the death site from time to time. The deceased worker had been known for always smoking part of a cigar at lunchtime. Another worker shares an incident in which a worker fell into the heat. According to the tale, the plant processed the steel anyway. Now, every time a ladle is poured, the dead worker's face appears at the top of the pool of molten steel. Still another worker talks about the haunting that began after a laborer fell into the melting pot, which is connected to the furnace. And this guy says he had tripped on a slippery patch of ash and couldn't get his footing and went in. Everyone was just in shock. They shut off the furnace for a few minutes just because, but there's nothing you can do at that point. After it happened, there wasn't a day that went by that the furnace didn't shut itself off. They would go nuts trying to fix it, calling specialists in, even the manufacturer, to complain. It would seem fine and then it would happen again. Oh, so it would shut its own self off. Carol, with their ghost stories. What's the title says? Ghost stories. Ghost stories. Stories of such accidents are also joined by rumor of murder in the mills. As one mill worker observed, it's so dangerous and so many people and so many things happen accidentally. It's the easiest thing in the world to off a guy and not even say anything. Guys disappear sometimes and they just assume he fell in somewhere or whatever. I heard there was one guy who was messing with another guy so much that the guy dropped an air hammer on him from 3 floors up. In one case, dating back to the 1960s, two workers reportedly had such hatred between them that they seemed always on the verge of physically attacking each other. According to the story, there was a woman involved. There always is, isn't there? Or money. And one was bitterly jealous, while the other was openly arrogant about his relationship with her. One day, the latter fell 5 stories and crushed his ribs against a piece of machinery, causing internal bleeding that killed him in minutes. The only witness to the accident was his relentless rival, who said he had seen him standing there 1 minute, gone the next. Some exposed electrical wires along the ground were pointed out by the survivor, who suggested that he must have tripped. According to his co-workers, none of them believed his story. He quit soon after the incident, claiming that something had tried to push him to his death at the exact spot where his rival had plummeted to his end. Chapter 2, St. Mary's Mercy Hospital. And this hospital is where I was born, guys. I was born in St. Mary's Mercy Hospital, Gary, Indiana. And I think that's where we got our tonsils out. And I think that's where I was when I was in kindergarten and first grade for pneumonia. I think that's the hospital I was in. I think I'll have to ask my dad. Okay, St. Mary's Mercy Hospital. When I was first invited to write this book, one of the first things I did was to ask my Hoosier friends and colleagues, other paranormal investigators, if they'd done any work at locations in Gary. Surprisingly, very few had. Though a number of our friends turned out to be from Gary originally, little was known about the supernatural legends or realities of their hometown, with one common exception. Almost every Indiana investigator, and many from Illinois and Michigan for that matter, had spent at least a few hours in St. Mary's Mercy Hospital, a massive, dilapidated medical center building near the heart of the city. Opened just after the turn of the 19th century and dedicated 2 years after the city's founding in 1908, the hospital was like many of Gary's institutions at first. Started truly out of need as no hospital had been built to accommodate the steel industry workers and their families. At first, the hospital was, like many hospitals of the time, more of a smattering of small homes with whatever equipment and service could be provided by the Sisters of St. Francis, who saw the need and set up shop. Very quickly, the hospital grew to serve the burgeoning population. It would be only 2 years before the first of many expansions of the facilities. But though the need was high, funds were scarce. A 5-story brick structure slated for building at Tyler and 6th Streets was only partially constructed when the sisters stopped the construction due to the lack of money. It sat unfinished for a year until a local bishop asked another order of women for help in targeting funds for the hospital's completion. After a further year of work, the hospital was dedicated in 1914. Generations of growth followed the opening. Gary was thriving, and with it came the need for medical care. Donations of land allowed for greater expansion of the hospital just a few years later, adding more than 100 beds. That's where I was born, this hospital.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember what it looked like, but I do remember. I don't know. Let's see. In time, hundreds of additional beds, a nursing school, and highly specialized departments evolved. In the 1970s, the hospital would gain international fame as the birthplace of Michael Jackson and his siblings. The first sign of decline came in tandem with the hospital's fame. With the loss of key bases of the steel industry.
Just go to just say she remembers her birth.
I was just talking about the hospital. Because it hasn't been in use, for years. I thought it was tore down, but I'm finding out that I don't think it is. Kevin. Hi, Margot. Guys. I never said I remembered my birth.
I remember her birth. Oh boy, here's Garnet.
Okay. Let's see. With the loss of key bases of the steel industry, the need for personnel quickly tapered. Before 1970, the School of Nursing was shuttered, but it was not yet the end. The new decade also brought new hopes, and a restructuring mid-decade added the West Wing, home today of the police department, and a new name, St. Mary Medical Center. But despite changes, the decline continued.
Look at her.
Wow. Garnet, baby.
Hi.
In 1993, St. Mary's was sold to an out-of-town corporation. The name was changed to Northwest Family Hospital, and its operations restructured to target Gary's burgeoning population of poor, offering government-aided care to the needy. But the new owner lasted only 2 years before being forced to close. A grassroots effort began, led by a local judge determined to keep the hospital from closing, but regulations and time prohibited any foothold.
Hi, Sherry.
Private interest. Hi, Shirley. Private interests also lacked the money to keep the hospital running. Though the current owner agreed to sell the hospital for $1, no one could produce the millions needed to keep operations in order, even for a few days. Hundreds had already been laid off, but hundreds remained on the payroll. Oh, here, let me show you these two pictures here.
Look at her. She probably ended up falling asleep on my back.
Let's see. In October 1995, the emergency room at the hospital was closed forever. There was no turning back.
Yes, this is Garnet. Oh boy.
Let's see. In November, after almost a century of service to the people of Gary, the hospital, first known as St. Mary's Mercy, was shut for good. The next year, a massive sale was held, open to the public, who scavenged for file cabinets, medical equipment, furniture, and anything salvageable. In the years to come, attempts to make use of the barren but massive structure continued. In 1998, Mayor Scott King asked the city to support a plan to use the hospital building as the new Department of Public Services. Response was tepid at best, but the plan was finally approved, blessing a $15 million proposed build-out. But though the initial plan was completed, the police department moved in 2003 and remains there today. Further plans for the empty main building would never pan out. Proposals by the sheriff to use the structure as a rehabilitation center were scrapped. The county was as broke as the city, and nothing could be approved. Since its closure, the main hospital has never reopened. The effects of two decades of disuse are sobering. The solid structure that once stood ready for reappropriation is today a cavernous maze of peeling paint and rotted floors, dank stairwells, and dangerous decay. The same lack of fiscal funds that closed it protects it from the wrecking ball for now, but few believe the damage is even reversible anymore. I wonder if it's still standing. This is 2015. She is cutie, isn't she?
What?
He said, Lexi, call me if Scooter tries cracking the whip on you to get her seltzer water. Let's see. I am fortunate to be a longtime colleague of J.C. Rosita's and Len Miller, founders of the investigation group Heartland Hauntings and hosts of Shadows on the Wall Paranormal Radio. When J.C. heard about our project, he immediately contacted me to offer to share their stories and help me with the book. Incredibly, the two had investigated St. Mary's Mercy Hospital countless times. Len is a Gary police officer, and as mentioned, the Gary Police Department is currently housed in the newer and still intact wing of the hospital. Not only is the hospital very haunted by the memories of the past, but it also seems to be quite legitimately haunted by a plethora of paranormal manifestations which have triggered investigators for many years intrigued. Here, I'll show you what it looks like, right? This was in remains of the hospital wing, one of the wings in 2015. Look at all the broken windows. You're Mark, Kevin. I'm glad you guys are here. It is sad about the hospital. And I didn't even realize that Gary Police Department, part of it isn't from the, is part of the hospital. I had no idea. Because I've always wondered, where Mercy Hospital was. And here I have seen it because of the police station over there. I went over there for something before. I think the health department to get my birth certificate. So I actually know now where it's at. Let's see. It was one of the coldest days on record when we visited in January 2014. In the already dim light of mid-afternoon, the lights of the police station glowed comfortingly across the parking lot where I met Len and JC for our walk through the adjoining hospital structure with its gaping door frames, and windows, frozen literally and in time, its heat and lights cut off since its closure in 1995. I came with a background of stories that had been told to us by numerous paranormal investigators, and the scene certainly seemed perfect for what I'd heard. Incredibly, before we even entered the abandoned part of the hospital, Len shared stories of the myriad experiences encountered by police officers in the occupied wing of the hospital, which now houses the Gary Police Headquarters, including the record offices in the basement. According to police who work in the building, numerous encounters have occurred in the basement, including the prevalent sound of a woman's high heels clacking down the hall and across the floor. The sound actually going through a wall where a door used to be in the area's hospital days. Also, numerous are encounters in the basement's men's room, where officers have been using the facilities and have experienced the sound of another person coming into the room. Hearing the person enter another stall and close the door, officers are sometimes chilled to find that they are actually quite alone. Len remembers when he experienced it himself, and he says, Kevin. Okay, and he says, I had gone into a stall and was about to do my business and actually saw someone going in the stall next to me, saw their feet walking in. I finished and went out and was washing my hands and happened to see in the mirror that there was no feet under any of the stalls. Well, of course, that was suspicious, and I called, are you all right in there? And there was no answer. I actually ended up going over and knocking on the door, but still there was no answer. I finally gave the door a little push, and it swung open. There was no one there. There was no way anyone could have left. The hallway elevator is another spot that most agree is very strange. Though there is no sensor of any kind, the elevator doors will automatically open when an officer approaches. Len says he got to the point many years ago of just saying thank you to whomever is opening the doors for him. We spent a good 2 hours in the abandoned, freezing shell of St. Mary's taking photographs and recording for audio in the morgue, the psychiatric ward, and even in the maternity ward, where we were able to investigate the very room where Michael Jackson and many other Gary notables were born. Temperatures averaged about 15 degrees Fahrenheit in the massive stone structure, and even then there were 2 occasions on which the temperature still dipped about 15 degrees for several seconds. Audio recordings played back later turned up the sound of a woman. Audio recordings played back later turned up the sound of a woman laughing in the maternity ward, along with other sounds of a child humming, and in the psych ward, some unnerving sounds of a man making gruff sounds, accompanied by the sound of some sort of struggle between 2 men, grunting and shuffling. During one investigation, Len's daughter, Tori, was touched inappropriately by an invisible presence. Later in that same investigation, another female member was touched likewise in the same room. JC recounts an incident that occurred. About 2 years ago, in 2012, I think, we were working at the location with a gentleman who wanted to do a video production on the place. And as we were standing there talking, jokingly, my daughter came up and put her hand on my back. I kept talking, and I felt it again. And I turned around to smile at her like, "Ha ha, very funny." And she wasn't anywhere near me and said, "Dad, it wasn't me that time." The strong smell of flowers is also sensed in the building, even in deepest winter. And it's not in any one place, it travels. Len says it smells like a funeral home. All of a sudden, it's this strong smell around you, but just for a minute, and then it's gone. And then it happens again in a completely different place. Visual apparitions are also bountiful, along with those of the tactile and olfactory varieties. JC shares that one night he saw what looked like a woman in a white gown who came out of a patient room, turned around, and went back in. He went after her immediately, but there was no one in the room and no other exit. Police officers report seeing a small boy on the premises who disappears into thin air. And then there are other stories of a man being seen on the road outside the emergency room entrance. According to Len, a young rookie cop was sent there to take a report in the emergency room. He was standing at the desk when several young people rushed in, carrying their buddy who had just been shot. They dragged him into the hospital, laid him on the floor, and ran out, leaving him to bleed to death. The officer claims to have seen the man in the vicinity of the ER years after his death. Other stories are told of a man who was hit by a car right outside the entrance and died before he could be treated inside, and of another man who was killed in a farming accident in the small farms area in the 1960s, who was seen at the hospital for some time after his death on arrival at St. Mary's. Besides the obvious sources of hauntings, the many, many deaths at this oasis of help in a sea of violence, Len always says there are some other possibilities. According to legend, there was once a doctor who did unnecessary surgeries and experiments on patients. Rumors say that many died by his hands. Nothing has yet been found to substantiate the claims. Len wonders if this legend is a horror story inspired by something very real indeed, a tuberculosis outbreak in the mid-20th century. He wonders if perhaps doctors were trying experimental methods or treatments to be helpful to the sick. In July 2014, an organization called Michael's Dream Foundation announced plans to restore or rebuild St. Mary's Mercy Hospital as a children's medical recovery center. The foundation is a worldwide organization of Michael Jackson fans whose purpose is to renovate or build medical recovery centers for children. The foundation announced that in the case of St. Mary Mercy Hospital, the site assessment alone to evaluate the possibility of restoration, the cost would be involved, and the condition of the land was quoted at more than $9,000. The huge undertaking, if successful, will be a long time in the works. For now, the ghosts of St. Mary's Mercy Hospital are the only inhabitants, the only voices, and that has never happened. I'm pretty sure it's never happened. Okay, here's part of Mercy Hospital that has the Gary Police Headquarters in it. And then the second picture looking out over Gary from the ruins of St. Mary's Mercy Hospital, January 2014. I had no idea that was the former St. Mary's Hospital, like I said. I had no clue. And I'd always wondered where it was. And then this is looking from one of the floors inside the hospital. And I'm pretty sure that's the hospital I would have been in as a little kid, because I remember looking out the window and I was up real high and looking in the parking lot, waiting for my mom and dad when I had pneumonia. Let's see. Chapter 3, Ghosts of the... Kevin, oh, I'm going to close that. You're freaking me out now. Oh, I know they have the money to help, Josie. The only ones that ever came back here to Gary was, who was it? There was one of the brothers that's always come here to Gary. He still comes and visits his friends. Can't remember which brother. But I don't think Michael ever did. I'm not sure, though. Maybe he finally did, but I'm not really sure. I'm not sure on that. But I know one of the brothers was very tied to this area, or he was. I easily distracted. I got to read up with your ghost. Now I'm starting to get freaked out. I was so excited about finally buying a local book. I gotta think about getting scared. This sounds interesting here. Chapter 3, Ghosts of the Great Circus Train Wreck. The Boogeyman. In January 1993, during the Monday morning rush hour, 2 South Shore Line commuter trains running between Chicago and South Bend, Indiana, plowed into each other along the west edge of Gary, killing 7 passengers and injuring more than 60. The trains had been traveling in opposite directions, and both entered a narrow section of passage where only one train is supposed to run at a time. The trains were both running at full normal speed, and the impact ripped open the train cars, causing decapitations, severed arteries, and massive injuries from flying debris. The trains both came to a stop at the edge of a trailer park on the outskirts of town, where residents, hearing what sounded like an explosion, came out of their homes, discovered the scene, and called 911. One of the first police officers on the scene was Len Miller, who remembers the event well. He says, "I was one of the first officers on the scene. Oh, and when I was running up the hill, I saw a child's severed head on the ground. Oh my God. When I went into the train, there was so much blood. It smelled just like a butcher shop. It was a cold day, but it was really bad. What happened was apparently the trains were on the same track, but didn't realize it until the last moment. There were deaths, too many, a good amount. I had a CI, a confidential informant, who lived there at the hill, a very rundown trailer park. She lived about 30 feet from the tracks where it actually happened. And after the accident, for a long time, she would report people, cries at night, moans. There were shadow people running around. At night, she would see shadow people walking at night with no one actually there. Ugh. Residents in the area still talk about the residue of that horrific day in 1993, continuing to report shadowy figures and also the occasional sound of what seems like an explosion. Those who remember the crash say they cringe when they hear the sound, fearing another deadly tragedy on the tracks above. Ghost lore in other parts of Northwest Indiana also testifies to the tragic past of the lakefront rail mills. In South Bend, the ghost of an old engineer is seen standing with his lantern along the tracks, reportedly the phantom of a suicide many years ago. In Chesterton, that's where I went to high school. Witnesses say the ghost of a man who was pushed or fell from a train still wanders near the site of his demise. Without a doubt, though, the most infamous wreck in Northwest Indiana history and the most famous train crash ghosts in the region was the 1918 crash of the Hagenbeck-Wallace circus train. The Hagenbeck-Wallace circus traveled across the United States in the early part of the 20th century, and in its heyday was the second largest circus in America, next to Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. Based in Peru, Indiana, the circus employed Joe Skelton, the father of Red Skelton. Red Skelton seems to come up a lot. Tammy McD is related to him. She told us that. We were talking about him as a funny comedian. Ghostbusters. Okay, the circus employed Joe Skelton, the father of Red Skelton, as a clown for a time. His father had also performed with the circus before going on to the vaudeville circuit. World-famous American clown Emmett Kelly also started his career performing with Hagenbeck Wallace as Weary Willie during the Great Depression. The circus had started out as the Carl Hagenbeck Circus at its founding by animal trainer Carl Hagenbeck, who introduced the use of rewards-based rather than fear-based animal training. In 1907, Benjamin Wallace, a livery stable owner from Peru, Indiana, bought the circus from Hagenbeck and merged it with his own, the B.E. Wallace Circus. Wallace's circus was legendary already. The show included a big top, a menagerie tent, a sideshow, 2 horse tents, and a cookhouse. By the turn of the 19th century, the circus required 26 train cars and several railroad lines to move around the country. Advertising high-class shows, the B.E. Wallace Circus was known for its stunning horses, top-notch talent, and intricately carved wagons. Wallace maintained his circus winter quarters in Peru, Indiana, on land once owned by the Miami Indians, which has led some paranormal investigators to wonder if there was a curse on the circus that led to the tragedies that befell it. That tragedy visited the circus grounds in 1913 when the circus lost 8 elephants, 21 lions and tigers, and 8 performing horses in the devastating Wabash River flood. Unable to recover, Wallace sold his interest in the circus to Ed Ballard of French Lick, Indiana. 5 years after the devastation of the flood, just before 4 a.m. on June 22nd, 1918, the Hagenbeck Wallace circus train was traveling over the South Shore tracks in northwest Indiana on its way from Michigan to the circus's next setup in Hammond, Indiana. The train had just cleared the city of Gary when the engineer of a rear following troop train, Alonzo Sargent, fell asleep and ran his empty train, a locomotive carrying no fewer than 20 empty Pullman cars, into the back of the Hagenbeck Wallace circus train. A fire broke out from oil lamps used to light the circus train's sleeping cars, and the flames surged through the old wooden structures, destroying everything in their path. A staggering 86 people died, and another 127 were injured, either from the impact or the resulting fire. Many victims were burned beyond recognition. Sargent later stated that he had slept little in the day before the crash and that he had indeed fallen asleep while conducting the locomotive at a speed of about 25 miles per hour after leaving Gary. And he says, leaving Michigan City, had cleared track to East Gary. And then, East Gary, that's where my granny and grandpa lived. They had the trains right in their backyard. Remember, I told you guys about it. My cousin was hit on that track when he was 2. And then years later, he died on that same track. He fell asleep on it. Hi, Pamela Patrick. Okay, anyway, let me start over. Leaving Michigan City, had clear track to East Gary, and there caught block of train ahead, reduced speed, but did not have to stop as block cleared before I reached it, reduced speed going through Gary to comply with rules, and saw no more signals at caution or danger until approaching curve east of Ivanhoe, where I found second signal east of wreck at caution. Was going about 25 miles per hour at this point, but did not reduce speed, as I expected the next signal would probably clear before I got to it, or that I would see it, if at danger, in time to stop. The wind was blowing very hard into cab on my side, and I closed the window, which made the inside of cab more comfortable. Before reaching the next signal, I dozed on account of heat in cab and missed it, not realizing what had happened to me until within 75 to 90 feet. I awoke suddenly and saw the tail or marker lights showing red on a train directly ahead of me, not realizing that the red end of this train was so close. I started to make a service application, but before completing it, placed brake valve handle into emergency position. We struck almost instantly after making the brake application. Don't know whether I closed the throttle or not, but I think I did. Looked to see where the fireman was and saw he was running toward the gangway. Did not see a fuse, hear a torpedo, or see any other warning signal up to the time I saw the red tail lights. Wreck happened at about 4:05 a.m. June 22nd, and I stayed there for an hour or more assisting in getting people out of the wreckage. I have been in the service of the Michigan Central Railroad Company for approximately 28 or 29 years, the last 16 of which I have been continuously employed as an engineer. I am in perfect physical condition as well as mental condition and have had no illness within 25 or 30 years requiring the service of a doctor. There was nothing defective about the air brakes or other mechanism of the engine or train that I was operating, nor was there any defective condition of any of the signals or track upon which I was operating to the best of my knowledge. The accident was due solely to the fact that I accidentally fell asleep, and I had no intent to injure any person, nor was same done with malice, but solely through an accident as foresaid. With the mass losses both in staff and equipment, other competing circuses, including Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, offered both equipment and talent to Hagenbeck Wallace, so that only 2 performances had to be canceled. But the losses were fatal, not only to the performers who had died, but also to the circus itself. After the tragedy, circus operators Jeremiah Mugovan and Bert Bowers bought the struggling Hagenbeck Wallace Circus, which became part of their growing empire of circuses. A year later, they invited Ballard to become a partner, and the 3 formed the American Circus Company. The former winter headquarters of the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus at Peru, Indiana, now hosts the American Circus Hall of Fame. Oh, okay. I've seen that sign, I think, when we've been down there. Although Sargent and his fireman, Gustav Kloss, were criminally charged in Lake County, Indiana, following a trial, the jury found itself deadlocked, and a mistrial was declared. Prosecutors declined to retry the case, and charges were dismissed in the summer of 1920. 5 days after the crash in Indiana, most of those killed in the wreck or fire were buried in a mass grave at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Chicago suburb of Forest Park. Just a few months before the disaster, the Showmen's League of America had purchased a substantial plot of land in the cemetery, set aside as Showman's Rest, and earmarked for the burial of circus performers. Most of the dead were not able to be properly identified due to massive destruction by the fire, and so most graves are marked unknown male or unknown female. A few of the remaining graves bear only the circus names of the dead, including Smiley and Baldy. 4 stone elephants mark the corners of the site, their trunks lowered in a gesture of mourning. Each summer, here's that picture right here. Each summer, the International Clown Week Festival is held at the site with scores of circus performers and trainers in attendance, entertaining the large crowd and placing flowers on the graves of their deceased comrades. Ever since the burials, visitors to the graves at Showman's Rest have reported hearing the sounds of wild animals, lions roaring, elephants trumpeting, and so legends began that circus animals buried at the site were haunting the mass grave. Curiously, however, No animals were killed in the disaster, leading some researchers to wonder if the sounds were audio hallucinations or some sort of energy residue from the crash itself, still attached to the site where so many who experienced it were laid to rest. Later in the century, though, a local police officer realized the much less dramatic source of the haunting. Woodland Cemetery is located only about a mile away from sprawling Brookfield Zoo, and when the wind is just right, the sounds of its very much alive inhabitants can carry on the breeze over the graves of Showman's Rest. But what of the crash itself? Do the spirits of the great circus train wreck linger on the rails between Gary and Hammond, even nearly a century later? For years, paranormal investigators have traveled to the site of the wreck, hoping to capture evidence of the event in the form of photographs and video or audio recordings of frequencies out of human hearing. Numerous investigators have recorded spikes in the EMF field during investigations, as well as light anomalies captured on film, particular balls of light or orbs believed by some to be spirit energy. One gentleman who used to spend a lot of time train spotting in the area claims to have seen the figure of a man pacing back and forth at the site of the crash and disappearing. Perhaps it is the long-gone spirit of Alonzo Sargent, wishing he could return and undo the damage. The witness related, "I would come in the evenings to watch the commuter trains go by and sometimes stay and watch for other freight trains passing, and it was always just at twilight, when it had just gone dark, that I would see this man appear. I never felt afraid or even thought anything of it, even after I had seen him once or twice. While it was happening, I would think, I wonder if he's just lost, something or what he's doing there. And it wouldn't be until he disappeared again that I remembered I was seeing this entity or vision or what have you. I haven't been out there in many years, but I still think about that sometimes." Others have recorded what seemed to be voices from the accident scene, including one recording I collected of a woman crying, "Help them," and another of a male voice whispering, "Burning up." J.C. Rosaritas, part of Heartland Hauntings, remembers recording a voice that he wasn't expecting. As he played back a recording he had made at the accident site, he remembers, "I had to rewind it 2 or 3 times, and it was very clear, but I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It just said, 'Boo.'" And he says, "Leave it to a circus performer." He rewound it 2 or 3 times and heard, "Boo." And here, Showman's Rest today. There's unknown male, died June 26, 1918. A couple of the stones right there. How long has this been? 2 hours. Wow, that went fast. I'm going to save this and we'll read it again sometime. The next chapter will be The Haunting of Duneland over by the lake. I'm going to mark this. This other one that we'll look at too sometime. It's Spooky Indiana, Tales of Hauntings, Strange Happenings, and Other Local Lore. Ooh, there's one in here from Evansville and Indianapolis. San Pierre, we go through that little town on the way to our cottage in Buffalo. San Pierre, really? Wait, I want to read this one on San Pierre real quick. Find San Pierre. Ooh, there's one called Granny's Revenge from Peru, Indiana. Okay. Dog Face Bridge, San Pierre. Got to read this. You want Evansville? Okay, we'll go to Evansville. Let me run to the bathroom real quick, guys, okay? Let me run to the bathroom. This water's coming through me, and I'm going to get another water. Getting my own water, Kevin. I didn't ask Lexi for it. Got my own. Wait a minute. Oh, Tammy, thank you so much. You didn't have to do that. You guys must be rich. And you're welcome, Tammy. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really sweet. You guys are very sweet. Thank you, Tammy. Love you too. Hi, Kathy from Texas. Okay, Kevin wants to hear in Evansville. Where my water? Oh, I love elephants too. One minute. Always so thirsty. Okay, we'll read Evansville and San Pierre, and then that'll be it for now. Okay. Let's see, where's Evansville? Oh, Francisville too. Wow. Greencastle. Okay, Evansville. 126. Okay, Luke Garou. He sat at the bar in the inn. It was early fall in the year of our Lord, 1880, and the hunter was drinking whiskey and listening to rumors as the sun set on Evansville. It was a rumor that had brought him to town on that particular night. According to the story he'd heard, some kind of wild animal was stalking people near the graveyard at the edge of town. The animal reportedly looked like an overgrown wolf, but unlike a wolf, it did not flee when confronted by guns or fire, both of which had been used in an effort to frighten off the fell creature. Bullets seemed to have no effect upon it, and the only way to escape its sharp teeth was to flee as fast as possible in the opposite direction. More than one traveler had appeared at the local inn with ripped clothing and bite marks upon arms and legs where the menacing creature had harassed them. The town had raised a hunt in an effort to eradicate the menace, but hunters could do little about a creature that was impervious to bullets. Now, a month after the first sighting of the creature, the town was in a panic. Parents kept little children inside at night, and folks found alternate routes rather than pass the graveyard at any time of day. From the descriptions he'd heard, The hunter knew at once that the creature was a loup-garou. According to his French-Canadian grandmother, loup-garous, or werewolves as they're known in English, were men who had neglected their religious duties for so long that they had fallen under the spell of the devil, who turned them into wolves and forced them to do his bidding. His grandpère, on the other hand, told him that loup-garous were a more natural phenomenon, humans born with the ability to shape-shift at will. However, both his grandparents agreed at one point the only way to defeat a werewolf was to cut him with a silver knife blade, which returned the loup-garou to his human shape. They had given their grandson a knife with a silver blade as a Christmas gift when he was 10 years old, and he'd carried it with him ever since in the top of his right boot. The hunter sipped his whiskey thoughtfully as several of the local men waxed eloquently over the creature's side and fierceness. To hear them, you might well believe it was as large as a baby elephant, with teeth sharper than a grizzly bear and the speed of a galloping horse. Their descriptions were as vague as their own directions. The creature had been seen on the north side of town. No, it was last seen on the south side of town, near the graveyard. Which graveyard? There was no graveyard over there. Do you mean the cemetery to the east of the Mercantile? No, the one across town, and so forth. The hunter paid for his whiskey and asked a big red-bearded fellow if there was a bounty on the mysterious creature. Oh, yes, the man said. A big reward was offered for the body of the beast. The hunter nodded thoughtfully and headed outside with his rifle. If the creature really was a loup-garou, the gun wouldn't do him any good, but the creature might loup, L-O-U-P hyphen G-A-R-O-U. I know, this would be great. I was just thinking of Foxy Bot with this story. Yes, she does say that. Yes. You guys are right. I was thinking of that. Foxy's always talking about that. But the creature might just be a wily old wolf that was smarter than the folks who hunted it. That was the problem with rumors. You couldn't tell if they were true until you confronted the beast in question. And by golly, you'd better be prepared for anything. From a baby elephant with sharp teeth that moved like a horse, to a wily wolf with a bad temper, to an evil loup-garou. A gun would work in 2 of those cases, and his silver knife would take care of the third. The hunter headed slowly down the lantern-lit avenue and then turned toward the back streets, wandering through every graveyard in town, hoping to lure the beast out the beast. He was a patient man. He'd walked every inch of Evansville every night until he found the creature. It didn't pay to be in a hurry, and a panicked hunter was a dead hunter in his experience. As he meandered slowly through the dark streets, the hunter wondered why the loup-garou had chosen to haunt this particular place. Had someone laid a curse upon the town? He hadn't heard of any witches living in Evansville, and to his knowledge, there weren't any disastrous wars with the natives in the region that might have resulted in a medicine man's curse. Perhaps it was a family matter. Were the victims of the loup-garou all related somehow? Absent-mindedly, he turned into a lane lined with apple trees that led by an old graveyard. It was very dark, rather cold and silent, too silent. The hunter went on the alert at once. There were no sounds at all, save for his soft footfalls on the dirt road and the occasional thud as he accidentally kicked a fallen apple. No creatures stirred. No insects buzzed or chirruped. No swish of wings from a bat or a night bird. Even the wind was still. He had his gun cocked and ready when a nightmarish figure suddenly leapt over the iron fence surrounding the graveyard. He pulled the trigger as the animal jumped on him, knocking his gun aside. Oh, here's the drawing that they've done. The hunter thrust his hands desperately upward and closed them around the creature's neck, barely keeping its teeth from his jugular vein. Man and beast rolled over and over in the dusty lane, the hunter on top, then the beast on top, then the hunter on top. The smell of crushed apples filled the air as their bodies crushed the fallen fruit, and hard lumps of apple bruised the hunter's back as he struggled for his life. The creature's claws scrabbled at the hunter's jacket and pants, ripping through the heavy cloth and scraping his skin. Its stinking hot breath gagged him as the beast snarled and struggled to loosen itself. It had the general shape of a wolf, the hunter noted grimly, as he rolled again to maneuver his way to the top of the creature. He forced it down into the dirt with all of his weight and pressed hard against its neck, cutting off its breath. The beast squirmed and snapped desperately, its teeth inches from his face. But the creature was slowly strangling, and its struggles grew feebler as the breath was choked out of it. The hunter took a chance and freed one hand momentarily to grab the silver knife from his boot. The moment of truth was at hand. In one swift gesture, he whipped out the knife and drew it across the creature's neck just below his stranglehold. Blood gushed onto his clothing, and then the creature began to change. This sounds like a Foxy Bot story too, doesn't it? Its whole body writhed strangely, stretching out in some places and condensing in others. This could be Foxy Bot's father or great-great-great-grandfather. The transformation felt so strange beneath the hunter's panting, sweating body that he rolled off the beast and watched in the dim moonlight filtering through the leaves of the apple trees. He held his knife ready for whatever was to come, tense to leap upon the horribly stretching thing on the ground in front of him. Finally, it solidified and became a naked man lying face down, covered in dirt and squashed bits of apple. The naked man lifted his head slowly, and the hunter saw blood trickling from a cut on his neck. "Who are you, Loop Guru?" the hunter demanded. "Why are you plaguing this town?" The man sat up and put his hand over his bleeding neck. "I am no one now," he said bitterly. "Once I had a good job, happiness, a wife and family. Then I was framed for murder. I stood trial and was acquitted. But when I came home, I found my job had been taken away. My family had disowned me. And my wife had run away with a man from Evansville, taking my only child with her. I tried to get custody of the child, but the courts would have nothing to do with me. So I made a deal with the devil." The Loop Guru turned his dark eyes away from the hunter, half hate, half defiant, half ashamed. "I became a Loop Guru, and brought terror to the people of Evansville, hoping to drive my wife and her paramour away from town. I planned to steal my child out of his carriage when they fled and to take the boy to his grandparents in Canada. Now I don't know what I shall do. He turned toward the hunter again, his eyes blazing. Kill me. Put me out of my misery. You can do it. You have the knife. The hunter felt pity stir within him. Slowly, he sheathed the knife and said, Leave this place, Loup Garou. Go home to Canada, or go west to the mountains or California. Take a new wife and have more sons. I will give you one more chance to redeem yourself. Redeem myself, the man spat angrily. But there was a note in his voice that told the hunter he wished to be persuaded. I sold my soul to the devil to become what I am. And my knife has brought you a second chance, the hunter said calmly. If you remain a man for a year and a day, you buy your freedom. Only if you do not speak of me to any man during that time, the Loup Garou said bitterly. We must both be silent, or the spell will remain upon me for all time. I will not speak if you will leave this place, the hunter said. If I see you again in any form, I will finish the work my knife began. The Loup Garou hesitated for a long moment. Then he nodded silently. Now go, said the hunter. Go and do not return. The Loup Garou slunk off into the graveyard without another word. The hunter watched his retreat, wondering if he'd done the right thing. He'd always trusted his instincts in the past, and they'd never let him wrong. His instinct now was to let the man go in peace, to find a new life for himself, even though it meant sacrificing the reward. Perhaps it would turn out all right in the end. A good deed was supposed to be its own reward, right? In the meantime, he'd stick around Evansville for a week, just to make sure the Loup Garou was truly gone. No use in taking chances. The hunter slipped the silver knife into his boot, picked up his rifle, and headed back to the inn, whistling cheerfully. Just going to read one more for now. This is a lot of reading. The Loup Garou. You're welcome, Irene. Thanks for listening. Let me find the Saint Pierre one, that little town I drive through on our way to Buffalo. Place always looks kind of creepy. I'm not surprised they'd have something there. There's just a bar there called the Oasis towards the end of town. When you first come into town, there's a cemetery and there's a bar. There's a closed down grocery store. It's abandoned. And there's a veterinarian's office. Not much there at all. Okay, where is it? Saint Pierre, number 8, page 88. Okay, Dog Face Bridge, Saint Pierre. When my friend Diane suggested that we go to Dog Face Bridge to celebrate Halloween, I thought it was a great idea. I'd heard stories about the haunted bridge all my life, but I'd never visited it. So I called my girlfriend, Lisa, and Diane called her boyfriend, Cliff, and the four of us drove out to the bridge together at dusk to watch the sun go down and wait for something spooky to happen. We decided Diane should drive her car since she had a lead foot and was always getting speeding tickets. As I said to Lisa, when you are investigating the supernatural, you want someone fast in the driver's seat in case you need to make a quick getaway. Diane sat with Cliff in the front, and Lisa and I snuggled in the back as we drove and drove and drove through the darkening countryside. This place truly was in the middle of nowhere. To take our minds off the long drive, Diane related the history of the haunting as she'd heard it in school. Sometime around 1950, a newly married couple was leaving Saint Pierre on their honeymoon trip. They were driving down Route 1100 West, laughing and chattering excitedly about their new life together as they drove over the first bridge and headed along the narrow road toward the second. The husband had just steered the car onto the second bridge when a dog came trotting toward them from the far end. The brand new husband swore and swerved to miss the creature, but the car skidded, knocking the dog off the bridge and plunging after it into the water below. The dog and the couple died instantly. Gruesomely, the heads of both the dog and the bride were severed from their bodies during the accident. The woman's head was found in the wreckage of the car near her dead husband, but her body was missing. The dog's body was found lying half in and half out of the water, but its head was missing. Shocked and saddened by the tragedy, the town determined the road was too dangerous and closed off the bridges, and that was the end of the story, until rumors sprang up from the farmers and other townsfolk living near the sealed-up bridges. They talked of a bright light that appeared on the road and came swiftly toward the first bridge before disappearing abruptly. Rumors also spread of a phantom dog barking and of a grotesque monster with the body of a woman and the head of a dog that nightly roamed the path between the two bridges. It was said that if the dog woman caught a person walking on the old road, she would chase after them, barking shrilly. If her cold hands and sharp dog teeth caught the trespasser before he or she reached the first bridge, the victim's body would be wrenched apart and eaten, the tattered remains cast into the river where the dog and the couple had lost their lives. But if they reached the first bridge in time, the monster would turn away to lie in wait for its next victim. As Diane finished her gruesome tale, Lisa shivered in my arms and squealed, "Oh my gosh, we should turn around. We're going to die." "We're not going to die," I reassured her. "I'll protect you." I was bluffing, of course. If the dog woman existed, there was no way I would be able to save anyone from its malice, except maybe by running really, really fast. But Lisa liked my swagger, and she cuddled closer as we turned onto the old road, leading toward the two bridges. It was a narrow road full of potholes, and Lisa grew more and more nervous as we drove into the darkening twilight. Diane flipped on the headlights, and Lisa screamed shrilly, pointing at the light shining ahead of us. "It's the ghost light," she cried, grabbing my arm so tightly she nearly cut off the circulation to my hand. "It's just a reflector off the bridge," Cliff said calmly from his forward vantage point. "Relax, Lisa." But Lisa was trembling so hard, I knew we'd have trouble getting her out of the car. Diane, meantime, was doing a very tight K turn so that the car was aimed back toward the road in case we needed to make a quick getaway. As soon as Diane turned off the engine, Cliff bolted out of the car with his flashlight and headed whooping toward the bridge. So much for secrecy. As I had predicted, Lisa went mulish and refused to leave the car. Finally, Diane handed her the car keys and made her get into the driver's seat. "You be our getaway driver," Diane said to Lisa. Relieved, Lisa nodded. I gave her a reassuring kiss and then followed the others. I paused for a second at the road's dead end to stare at the bridge, standing just in front of the barrier, blocking cars from crossing. I'd pictured a modern kind of bridge with guardrails, but it was one of those really old steel structured bridges. Looking at it made goosebumps creep along my arms. And I started looking for a stick or something to defend myself with, just in case old Doghead showed up. I was leaning down to pick up a thick walking stick when I heard something heavy walking in the bushes about a foot away. It sounded heavy, as if it were a big animal or a tall person. Or both at once, whispered a tiny voice in the back of my brain. My pulse throbbed with fear, and I froze in my bent over position. At once, the rustling ceased, and the woods around me grew very quiet. Then a shout came from the bridge, breaking the spell of the silence. "Come on, Gary, what are you waiting for?" It was Cliff, the enthusiast. "I'm coming," I called back, grabbing up the stick and hurrying behind the barrier. Around me, the wind picked up, making a sound like the ocean surf in the trees above. I could dimly see Diane and Cliff huddled together at the rusted railing, shining their flashlights in the water. But darkness was almost upon us, and I knew a few minutes more would turn them into dark figures, black on black. I dug out my own flashlight and turned it on, shining it cautiously down the length of the old bridge, looking for booby traps. I could see holes in the old road that crossed the rickety bridge, and as I looked, several small stones, loosened by the feet of my friends, fell down into one of the holes and splashed into the water below. I made a mental note of the position of the holes, having no desire to follow the rocks into the drink. As I stepped onto the crumbly old bridge, I heard the sound of a dog barking way off in the distance. I froze, and the bridge seemed to rumble below my feet, like the growl of a big dog, although that might have been the wind, which was blowing up a gale overhead. "What was that? Did you hear that?" Diane asked excitedly, staring down into the dark water. "Just shut up and listen," Cliff replied with equal excitement. For a moment, I thought the bridge was going to collapse. It groaned and creaked in the wind as I made my way toward my friends, carefully avoiding the holes. Cliff had spotted something to his right, all covered in weeds and leaves. He shone his flashlight on the object and gave a shout. "Look, it's a tire. It's from the accident." "It's not from the accident," I said, inching past another hole to reach the railing beside him. "The couple was killed on the second bridge, not the first one." I gripped the railing and could feel the bridge trembling slightly beneath my hand, like a frightened puppy. It made me want to comfort it somehow, a ridiculous thought. "Come on," said Diane. "The second bridge is down the path." She loped across the bridge, flashlight darting here and there, illuminating rusted girders, a dark patch of water through a hole in the boards, a red leaf bush growing beside the rail, and a man's shoe lying on the far side of the bridge. Cliff and I followed in her wake, catching up with her when the path narrowed and she was forced to slow down. It was at this juncture that the whole expedition became surreal to me. The woods seemed to close in on us. The wind howled and the trees rustled and shook, but the three of us seemed to be wrapped in a bubble of traveling silence. Every time I glanced into the dark trees on either side, I thought I saw pinpricks of light, like the reflection of light in a dog's eyes. a very tall dog, the size of a human. I shuddered. Diane was chattering enthusiastically to Cliff as we walked, but none of her words were registering in my ears. All I could hear was the roar of the wind. All I could feel was the strange bubble of silence around us. That's when the barking began. It started on our right side, then switched with unnatural speed to the left, then to the right again. Diane shrieked and clutched at Cliff, almost banging him in the eye with her flashlight. I turned my flashlight this way and that, trying to follow the sound. "Gary, let's get out of here," shouted Cliff. I agreed wholeheartedly and turned around and saw the glowing figure of the dog-headed woman standing directly behind me. That's the terrible thing about phantoms. They don't follow normal rules. The barking sound increased, now on both sides of the path, as if 20 dogs were closing in on our position. But the apparition in front of me was silent, as if it, were trapped in the bubble with us. It was tall, and the woman's body was clothed in a pretty floral traveling dress, circa 1950. The floral gown somehow made the dog's head, rising from her neck, seem even more grotesque, and the eyes in the dog's head glowed red. I reeled back against Cliff and Diane, who whirled around to see what was wrong. Diane screamed, Cliff shouted, and I gave a sudden wild roar, bent over, and ran right at the monster, my head and shoulder tensed for impact. I plowed into the creature like a linebacker, taking down an opponent, and for a moment my body was filled with heart-stopping coldness. I caught strange visions from two perspectives. A looming car bore down on a small dog. At the same instant, the woman looked through the windshield and saw the same dog. Then I was through and shouting to my friends to run, run. I heard Cliff dodging the phantom on the right side of the path and Diane crashing around it on the left. Light from the dog-headed woman glowed all around us, illuminating the trees eerily from underneath, highlighting the bottoms of the leaves that were still whipping in the wind. I ran for my life, faster than I'd ever gone before, the air puffing out of me like a bellows. I thought my heart would burst from the strain as I pounded down the path, Cliff and Diane right behind me. The glow followed behind them, lighting the trail in front of us and urging us on. The barking of the dogs simultaneously preceded us and roared at us from behind. I spotted the first bridge ahead and put on a burst of speed I normally did not possess. But adrenaline will do that for a fellow, and the adrenaline was sure pumping now. I was across the bridge in a heartbeat, Cliff and Diane still right behind me. As we dodged around the barrier, I could see the car was running and the headlights were on. I grabbed for the door handle of the front passenger side and found it locked. "Lisa," I screamed, pounding on the window. "Lisa, open up. It's Gary." I heard Lisa fumbling with the lock as I yanked at the handle again. The rest of the doors unlocked, but I pulled at the wrong moment, and my door remained closed. "Again," I shouted to Lisa. In the longest second I'd ever lived through, Lisa leaned across and flicked open the lock for my door with her hand. Cliff and Diane had already slammed into the back seat by the time I made it into the front. "Floor it," Diane commanded from the back. Lisa slammed the car into gear with shaking hands and gunned it, the rear of the car fishtailing wildly for a moment before the tires gained traction. I glanced towards the bridge and saw a grotesque, dog-headed figure floating on the far side watching us. In a second, it disappeared behind a screen of trees as the car shot off down the road, seeming to hit every pothole as Lisa raced for home. "I saw it," Lisa cried through chattering teeth as she drove frantically down the rugged road. "I saw the bright light coming toward me down the road, just like in the story. I thought I was dead, but it vanished just before it reached the car." Well, we saw the dog-headed woman, Diane said from the back seat. At that, Jill nearly drove off the road in panic. That's a typo. It has to be. It should be Lisa. At that, Jill nearly drove off the road in panic. I caught the wheel of the car just in time and steered us back into the center. Don't freak out the driver, Cliff scolded his girlfriend. You nearly got us killed. After what seemed like ages, we reached the main road and everyone relaxed, more or less. We didn't talk much on the return trip. I think we all had enough scare for one Halloween. So talk to Dex. Oh, yes, I know that very well. Now, that was lots of reading tonight. Oh, do you, Irene? You're welcome, Kathy. Good, Lisa. I hope you enjoyed them too. Said great stories. Thank you, guys. Thank you for super chats. You did not have to do that, but thank you so much. It's really sweet. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Got to give my throat a rest. Thank you, guys. It was fun. Yeah. Love y'all. Toot toot. Beep beep. Ooh, sounds good, Lisa. Yum, yum, yum. Hi, Josie, Irene, Nicole, Kevin, Mommy Ramblings, if you're still listening. Maybe you fell asleep in your chair. It's kind of early there. I love you too, my boo, Lisa, and Brian Clan, who made an appearance in Davita. Bye, y'all. See y'all laters. Love yous.